Okay, so let's dive in. You know that feeling, the one you get sometimes when the news is just spinning and everything feels supercharged politically,
Hmm.
and the planet seems to be practically shouting at us, and there's just this background hum of anxiety.
Yeah, like things just don't quite add up. A bit absurd, even.
Exactly. Maybe even a little nauseating.
Mm.
That specific feeling. What if I told you that feeling, that sort of disorientation when everything feels overwhelming? What if it's not just us now?
You mean someone else felt this way before?
Well, yeah. What if a philosopher, writing almost 100 years ago about his own chaotic times, totally nailed that feeling, and maybe even gave us some ways to think about it?
Okay, I'm intrigued. Who are we talking about?
Jean-Paul Sartre. That's the idea we're digging into today, based on Stuart Sim's new book, Sartre, Existentialism, and the New Age of Nausea.
Ah, okay. Sim's argument is that Sartre is actually really relevant now.
Pretty much, yeah. He calls Sartre a fellow traveler for our troubled times. It's a strong claim.
It is. So what's our mission here?
Our mission for this deep dive is to kind of unpack Sim's argument. We want to see if Sartre's ideas, things like nausea, bad faith, authenticity, can actually help us make sense of why things feel so, well, chaotic right now.
And maybe how to deal with that feeling.
Maybe. We'll look at the parallels Sim sees between the 1930s and today, which are kind of unsettling. We'll explore how Sartre's ideas might shed light on, the rise of authoritarianism, this feeling of bad faith in public life.
Okay. And you mentioned other things, too.
Yeah, we'll touch on climate change denial through an existential lens, and even why conspiracy theories seem so powerful. It's basically a deep dive into what's making us all feel a bit queasy, using Sartre as our guide.
Right. And that central idea from Sim, it's this concept of a new age of nausea, isn't it?
Exactly.
He's taking that feeling from Sartre's novel, Nausea, that intense awareness of just existing, the absurdity of it all, the ground feeling shaky.
You're not just like physically sick. Sim calls it alienation, powerlessness, that feeling of the absurd. He thinks many of us feel something similar today when we look at the crises we're facing.
And the book gives examples, right? Things that contribute to this. Modern nausea.
Oh, yeah. Specific things like the whole Brexit situation, the Trump presidency, the shock of Russia invading Ukraine, the Gaza conflict.
The grip conspiracy theories seem to have.
Right. And maybe the biggest absurdity Sim points to: our continued reliance on fossil fuels while the planet is clearly overheating.
And the data just keeps confirming it. Like the book mentioning the Copernicus Climate Change Service saying 2024 was the hottest year recorded globally.
It's that huge disconnect, isn't it? The science is clear, the extreme weather is happening, but it's still business as usual or even denial. That's where the absurdity of the nausea really kicks in, according to Sim.
It really does make you stop and think. I mean, do you recognize that feeling yourself? When you look at the news, consider the scale of these problems, that sort of disorientation.
Definitely. So Sim is saying don't just read nausea as old philosophy. Use it. Use it as a lens, maybe a diagnostic tool, to understand this specific feeling today. It gives it a name, a history.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's pivot. The first big theme Sim tackles using Sartre is political authoritarianism.
Yeah. And he sees some worrying correspondences, his words, between the rise of totalitarianism back in the 30s, when Sartre was writing, and our political climate now.
And he lists specific examples.
He does. The rise of these strongman figures globally, he mentions Putin, China, expresses concerns about Trump, Hungary, Belarus, Italy, India, North Korea, Argentina, Venezuela. It's a long list. He even refers to Anne Applebaum's idea of autocracy, Inc., this kind of network.
And the methods sound familiar too, like suppressing dissent, disinformation.
Exactly. Suppression of dissent, huge disinformation campaigns he points to, Russia targeting elections, restricting protests, even mentions the UK in that context, and this constant push for strong leaders.
And this is where Sartre's concept of bad faith comes in. How does Sim connect that?
Right. So bad faith in existentialism. It's tricky. It's not just lying to other people. It's fundamentally about lying to yourself, denying your own freedom, your responsibility, pretending things have to be a certain way, or that reality isn't what it clearly is.
Okay. So it's a kind of self-deception to avoid responsibility.
Precisely. And Sim links the rise of authoritarianism and just the general phoniness in politics to what he calls a deep lack of authenticity. He describes politicians in bad faith as playing at being politicians, like they're just performing a role.
Denying accountability, not feeling they need to respond honestly to criticism.
Yeah, that's key. Escaping the burden of responsibility that comes with freedom. Sim points to figures like Trump and Putin as examples of leaders who seem to operate in this mode, just deflecting, never admitting fault.
Mm-hmm. And Sim extends this idea beyond just politicians, doesn't he? To corporate leaders, too.
He does. He mentions people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, arguing that when they act autocratically or control information in ways that really shape public behavior, that's also a kind of autocratic impulse. Maybe even bad faith, driven by profit and power, potentially undermining democracy.
So the book's conclusion on this point is pretty serious.
Yeah, it's stark. Sim argues this combination, rising authoritarianism and pervasive bad faith, is a major threat to democratic principles, maybe the biggest threat since the Cold War era.
Okay, it's heavy stuff. Let's shift then to the second major theme, the climate crisis. Sim sees this as an even more existential threat, right?
Fundamentally so, yeah. But it's one met with so much denial and, again, bad faith.
It's kind of baffling, isn't it? The source really criticizes the fossil fuel industry here.
Oh, absolutely. For actively pushing denial, despite the overwhelming science, all driven by, as Sim puts it, a relentless search for profits. He points to things we all see, like those intense hurricanes, Helene and Milton in 2024, the glaciers melting, undeniable signals.
Signaling that are still ignored or downplayed.
Right. And Sim notes a parallel here between this industry denial and the tactics of conspiracy theorists. Denialism, he says, is basically the name of the game for both. Just dismiss any inconvenient evidence.
And he brings in some scientific concepts to frame this. Anthropocene, ecological overshoot.
Yeah, the Anthropocene, the idea that humans are now the dominant force shaping the planet's geology and ecosystems. And ecological overshoot, basically, using resources way faster than the Earth can renew them. Sim argues that refusing to face these realities is a profound kind of unauthenticity, a collective bad faith almost.
But existentialism isn't just about pointing out the problem, is it? Sim suggests it can offer something constructive.
Yes, he talks about promoting a collective conscience. The idea is we need this shared sense of responsibility to push back against purely market-driven, individualistic choices, especially around consumption, pollution, like our reliance on cars.
You mentioned the traffic management example.
Yeah, it illustrates the conflict perfectly. Sim references work by Marcus Moose on this. You have the individual's claimed freedom to drive wherever versus the collective freedom from the pollution and climate impact that causes. And narratives like the war on motorists exploit this tension, right? Framing collective good as an attack on personal liberty.
So it taps right into that individual versus collective responsibility theme. And Sim isn't the only one thinking along these lines.
No, he mentions others exploring existentialism and ecology, like Matthew C. Ally, the collection Earthly Engagements. It shows that even though Sartre himself wasn't writing about climate change back then, his core ideas, freedom, responsibility, facing reality, are really adaptable to this crisis.
So what does authenticity look like in the face of the climate crisis, according to Sim's reading of Sartre?
It means engaging honestly with the science, first off. But more than that, it means actively working towards solutions, creating conditions for recovery. It means refusing to give in to despair or denial, even when the predictions like from Lovelock's Revenge of Gaia or Linus's 6 Degrees, which Sim notes feel frighteningly relevant, now get more and more dire.
Right. So confronting the bleak reality, but choosing action over resignation.
Exactly. Which leads us to the third key theme. Universal theories, especially conspiracy theories, as a modern version.
Okay, so how do we get from Sartre to, say, QAnon? What's the connection Sim makes?
He argues that any theory claiming to have all the answers, demanding total belief, whether it's an old philosophical system or a modern conspiracy theory, has a detrimental effect.
Why detrimental?
Because they replace reason with faith. They demand uncritical belief and shut down any debate or alternative views. That dogmatism is fundamentally anti-democratic, anti-thought, really.
Ah, so it's the rejection of scrutiny, the claim to be the only truth.
Precisely. They resist evidence, dismiss anything contradictory as fake news or alternative facts. Sim mentions how old theories, like the moon landing hoax or 9/11 conspiracies, just linger, but also the real danger of new ones based on complete falsehoods. He gives examples like those UK riots in summer 2024 based on false stories about immigrants, or that bizarre claim Donald Trump made about Haitian immigrants eating pets.
It's disturbing how easily those narratives catch on and cause real harm.
It really is. And Sim briefly touches on Marxism here, as a historical example of a universal theory Sartre himself wrestled with.
Right, Sartre had a complex relationship with Marxism.
Very complex. He was on the left, but deeply critical of the party's demand for uncritical belief, which he felt denied individual freedom. Sim quotes Sarah Bakewell saying the party effectively demanded people never having to think again. For Sartre, who prized freedom and critical thought above all, that was unthinkable.
So the core danger Sim highlights is when leaders or groups demand this kind of uncritical belief, inventing their own facts.
Absolutely. That's when democracies get into real trouble, as he puts it. He stresses that these narratives are nearly always self-serving, politically or financially motivated. It forces us to ask, who benefits from this rejection of reality? Why are they demanding we believe it without question?
Okay. So as we kind of wrap this up, Sim acknowledges that looking at all this, it can lead to despair.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. It's hard not to feel that way sometimes. He draws that parallel again to the late 1930s, the fear of war, the rise of fascism. It feels familiar, unfortunately.
And he talks about human weakness, the persistence of denial.
Yeah, quite bluntly. He mentions Holocaust deniers as this extreme, horrifying example of how resistant people can be to even the most undeniable truths. It's depressing.
But he doesn't leave us there, does he? He proposes a response.
Oh,
Positive pessimism.
it sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it?
A little bit. What does he mean by it?
It's not giving up. Sim describes it as cold-eyed realism. It means looking squarely at how bad things are. He quotes someone saying things are bad, things are very bad, acknowledging that reality fully. But
still insisting on the need to struggle, to act, to dissent, even when it looks grim. It's about finding the authentic way to confront events. And for Sartre, that always involves choice and action, not passive acceptance.
And Sim contrasts this with other forms of pessimism, like John Gray's.
Right. He discusses Gray's book, The New Leviathans. Sim interprets Gray's view as essentially blaming liberalism for everything and predicting this inevitable slide into global chaos, which basically amounts to saying, well, might as well get up.
But Sim pushes back against that.
Strongly. He argues that liberalism, specifically social democracy, is what needs defending because the real alternative isn't some other system, it's autocracy. His point is crucial. You can argue with a liberal within reason, but you can't really argue with an authoritarian demanding blind faith.
Which brings it all back to Sartre's core idea.
Yeah.
Choice. Exactly. That thread runs through the whole book. Even when things seem utterly bleak or predetermined, we always have choices. Authenticity, in Sim's reading for our times, means making choices that recognize our freedom, our responsibility, and that crucial balance between ourselves and the collective.
So it's about actively resisting. Resisting bad faith, denial, the pressure to just believe things uncritically.
Yeah, resisting the forces that try to narrow our choices to make us feel powerless.
So looking at our current moment, this age of nausea, anxiety, polarization through Sartre's lens, as Sim encourages, it really does offer a framework, doesn't it?
It does. It helps name the feeling, maybe diagnose some root causes, and suggests a way to respond that isn't just despair.
And it makes clear that understanding these concepts, bad faith, authenticity isn't just some intellectual game.
Not at all. It's about recognizing the real forces shaping our world: denial, manipulation, attempts to shut down thought, and seeing how important our conscious, authentic choices are in response.
So, in an era that often feels absurd, dominated by bad faith, trying to silence dissent, Sim's work channeling Sartre leaves us with a pretty challenging thought.
Yeah, maybe the most authentic act, as the book suggests, is choosing not to give up, choosing to keep struggling for a more rational, more just world, even when that cold-eyed realism, that positive pessimism, tells you it's an incredibly tough fight. It really makes you think.
Yeah.
How does your engagement with the world reflect that choice?